yesterday, the U.S., I want to make sure I get this right, the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee, they hosted a hearing regarding the state of democracy, rule of law in Brazil, that whole thing. And a couple of friends of the show, but first, Paulo Figueiredo was one of the key witnesses at the hearing. And I say the word witness, but in this instance, it can be synonym for pimp. Watch.
Do you believe, sir, that the 2022 elections were in fact free and fair?
I do not.
Do you believe that the Brazilian armed forces then should have acted to support President Bolsonaro's draft decree?
Who? I'm sorry?
Do you believe that the Brazilian armed forces should have acted to overturn the 2022 election results?
I do not.
Okay, so even though you don't believe them to have been fair and free, you don't believe that the armed forces, you believe they properly acted in not acting to overturn those results?
Madam Congresswoman, are you familiar with the report of the military on the elections of Brazil?
I am, yes, but...
So what do you think they should have done when they realized that Brazilian elections was...
It's a simple, do you believe that the armed forces acted appropriately?
I do not.
What, you thought you were going to catch this guy? Do you have any idea what's been happening in Brazil? The judge, Moraes, we've been talking about, has been trying to treat people on social media like they're actual criminals. In Brazil, they are actively trying. They are actively trying to criminalize not just hate speech, and that's wrong. That's evil. Critical speech of the government. So I'm very glad to have this man on as a friend to the show, as well as his colleague, live from the Rumble studios, I believe, in Florida.
No, in D.C.
Oh, in D.C., that's right. They're all over. Mr. Paulo Figueiredo and Mr. Eduardo Bolsonaro, everybody. And for those of you who don't know, Mr. Figueiredo is an award-winning journalist. He's been censored by the Brazilian Supreme Court. And Eduardo Bolsonaro is, yes, son of the former president, President Bolsonaro of Brazil. And he's also a congressman over there. Gentlemen, can you hear us here?
Yes, Steve.
Very well.
Good. Well,
loud and clear.
I'm glad to have both of you here. I appreciate it. Mr. Bolsonaro, first, we've heard or saw that your father's in the hospital. I hope everything is okay. And I don't know if there are any updates, but we're all wishing you well here at the studio.
He's getting better. Thank you for the question, Steve. He's getting better. He had a problem in the skin, and he also had a problem in the, how to say that? The intestine?
Intestines, yes.
Intestine. Because in 2018, during his campaign, he was stabbed by a former member of the Socialism and Liberty Party, which in Brazil is extremely left, pretty much the same kind of people that talks with Bernie Sanders here in the US. They have a good connection, people from this Socialist and the Liberty Party and Bernie Sanders. And this guy, after he stabbed my father received a knife around 15 centimeters inside of his belly, and the guy twisted. So he almost died because of that. But the doctor says that time after time, he can have problems and maybe sometimes even be needed a surgery. Thanks God, in this case, it will not be necessary there because the response for the medicine that he's taken is doing a very good recovery. Okay. But that's it. That's it. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that he's recovering. I want to ask you guys about, first, let me set this up for people who may not know, stateside. And the reason this is so important is because this very much mirrors what could happen in the United States. To put a finer point on it, and I want to get some clips here, which I thought were very entertaining from yesterday. We're looking right now in Brazil, right? There's this Judge Moraes. Am I mistaken, or is he basically trying to prosecute and criminalize not just hate speech, but critical speech of the government, and more importantly, even from journalists and public figures on social media? He wants you, and he wants that to be considered criminal. Do I have that right?
You do. I think the proper word is not prosecute, because he hasn't prosecuted anyone. That's one of his tricks, but persecute, because he doesn't actually open cases. He has an ongoing investigation since 2019 that never actually pressed charges against individuals. This is the same investigation that now Elon Musk is part of it. Michael Schellenberger, journalist, U.S. journalist, is part of it as well. And I'm in it as well. So in this investigation, he never presses charges, but he makes decisions. So is within this investigation that he has been, he tried to arrest journalists now in exile in the U.S., Alan dos Santos, and he had censored me, canceled my passport, froze all my assets. He has been doing, he makes a lot of decisions, but he never pressed charges. So I wish he prosecutes people, but he doesn't.
Right.
Because if he prosecutes, you have the right to defend yourself, and we don't.
You know, it's kind of ironic, I guess, to see members of the court in Brazil trying to prosecute through the court of public opinion because they don't actually have confidence in their legal standing. But what's really disappointing to me is the behavior of some of our representatives here, right? Regardless of what happened on the 8th and what Marias is saying, you would think that the persecution of journalists or criminalizing of speech would be something that all Americans could condemn. But instead, we saw some trickery, some wordplay. I want to play this clip for you. This Congresswoman, Sydney Kamliger Dove, I hope I have that right, I don't care, tried to press you for some reason to disavow Brazil's dictatorship of the 1980s. Let's show this clip for people who didn't see it.
Do you disavow the military dictatorship that ruled Brazil from 1979 to 1985?
This has nothing to do with what we're discussing.
Okay, yes
here.
or no, please.
This has nothing to do with what
Yes
we're
or no.
discussing.
Reclaim. I can ask. This is my hearing.
And I can
Yes
answer-
or no.
With all due respect,
Amendment
I would
rights, I
hope that
can
there
answer
would be respect
whatever I
shown
want.
to the witness, too.
Moving on.
With all due respect for the witness and vice versa.
Mr. Chair, vice versa.
So, first question is, what do you believe her goal was here? And second question, how long before you were certain that it wasn't, in fact, a mop?
Well, first of all, I do not have any. Well, first of all, I do not have any respect for her. So just to make it clear for the record.
Perfect. Okay.
And I don't care if she respects me as well. She can control my answer. This is exactly what Moraes has been trying to do. And if he didn't, it's not going to be a congresswoman from, I think she's probably
California.
from California, right?
Yes.
Yeah, obviously.
Oh,
Yes, what a surprise.
I just thought it was a great clip. I have some more, but we're receiving this now. This is breaking, or at least it's happening today. Hopefully you guys are aware of this. My producers they've just let me know, Gerald signaled me, that Eduardo Bolsonaro is now under investigation for sharing a media article. Do I have that right?
yes, I shared. We are having a very serious problem in Brazil. In the south of Brazil, we are facing, I think, the biggest floods ever in the
floods,
history
yes,
of at least the south of Brazil.
In south of Brazil.
And I was sharing from a mainstream media in Brazil. It's like you sharing a news from the CNN. Imagine that.
New York Times, yeah, which is a bad thing. I agree. I think you should stop sharing articles.
Okay.
Yes.
But I was
mainstream media.
criticizing because it took too long to the federal administration to send some help to the people in the south of Brazil. It took 4 days, actually. And then instead of they start to improve, be more effective in the response of the floods, they are charging me. Now I'm under investigation to spread fake news. But wait a minute. If they really want to investigate something about the information, they should go after the mainstream media.
Right.
We too do not be perfect as well. The perfect thing is if they start to improve the effective response for the flood,
Right.
but no, they're stopping everything to coming after us. So you are right, Steve, when you're talking about, it's not all about rates. It started as, let's try to fight against hate speech and fake news and all of that. But now it's everybody who is criticizing Lula da Silva administration. You are under investigation. And we were talking here about Michael Schellenberg, about Elon Musk. Steve, I'm very serious with you. Tomorrow, depending, and according what you're going to speak here today in your show, you can be tomorrow under investigation in Brazil.
Yeah.
This is serious.
Good. Yeah.
I know that you don't care.
No,
but it shows how
Brazil
ridiculous
can
is
get
our
in.
system.
Brazil can get in line. I do care, and this is why I always say, we're able to survive this because of Mug Club, because we're actually supported by viewers, right? By people who join Mug Club. I'm scared for other people who aren't. There are people working in an office job where this happens, and they don't have the ability to defend themselves. Yeah, it's terrifying. I want to be really clear because the media will try and say that we blew this out of proportion or misrepresented it. You shared a media article from what would be considered in Brazil a relatively mainstream outlet regarding a slow response to floods. and you are being investigated. I have that right?
Yes, and the thing is, the media should be very concerning about all of that, because if they are going after me, if they want tomorrow, for example, imagine that they don't have money anymore to send to the media, because in Brazil, the Lula administration, they send billions and billions of dollars to the media. Of
course.
Imagine if tomorrow they don't have this money anymore. They can go after the media and force the media to talk good things about the government.
Right. Yeah.
Because, and control the narrative, because they're trying to kill the social media. Thanks God, we still have internet. That's why you are seeing the amount of people that go to the streets in the rallies of my father, Jair Bolsonaro. If you do not have a media, the rallies of my father, for example, in São Paulo 1 month ago, where we had 1 million people on the streets in favor of my father, you would never see that. And this is exactly what they want to do. So you, America, do not think this is an issue about the Brazil, because all of these Brazilian authorities, they are going all over the world. They were last week in London, before they were in New York, and then in Paris. They are spreading this Brazilian virus that is different for all the virus, the censorship virus that we have all around the world, because in Brazil, it is coming through the hands of the judiciary. Yeah. And then I ask you, if Joe Biden gets reelected and appoint 1 or 2 more justices of the Supreme Court, and they start to do exactly the same thing that are happening now in Brazil, you, America, what are you going to do?
Right.
So you have to spread the truth all around the world to avoid this virus to come here to U.S.
It actually came from the U.S. Actually, they did come from the U.S. We have been learning that the whole theoretical framework that was used by the Brazilian courts, by Moraes court, everything came from the United States. So they had meetings with the FBI agents. They had meeting with several Department of Justice agents on learning their tactics to quote unquote combat disinformation, and that's where the ideological framework came from. If you look and see who worked closely with Moraes on his office, was pretty much the usual suspects. People funded by George Soros, Open Society, Ford Foundation, Oak Foundation, and this is not a conspiracy theory. This is public information. So the virus came from the U.S., from deep state, and from American NGOs that are trying to shape the public debate around the world. Yeah. And of course, you had at the end of it, you had all the top officials of the Biden administration going to Brazil to threaten Brazilian public officials, military leaders, and bureaucrats to not challenge Moraes with threats, with open threats. So I think the virus came from the United States. It went to Brazil. It mutated, and it's gonna come back to this variation of the virus. Is gonna come back to bite you in like a second wave. Yeah, it's gonna come back to bite you in America.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, and it really is. I will say this: I'm still patriotic, but my patriotism has changed in the sense that, you know, I grew up. We had a country that was flawed, but largely, hopefully, we were hoping was exporting the ideals of the Constitution, freedom, and that's not what the United States is exporting right now. They are exporting, unfortunately, corruption and authoritarianism and wokeness. And so my patriotism it lies with what America was, the ideas of America, and unfortunately not what America, the United States of America, is right now. It doesn't mean that I'm not proud to be American. It doesn't mean that I believe anything other than the United States of America is the greatest country in the history of the world. That is true. But this is a dark spot, and I don't like that we, for the very first time, in my opinion, are patient zero in a lot of ways. And that's different. And to highlight that, before we go to Mug Club, I'd like to keep you guys on here. I wanted to specifically play this clip because I believe Eduardo tweeted about this exchange. And it was between this congresswoman and Professor Da Silva. How do I pronounce that name? How do I pronounce it?
You did it very well.
Da Silva. Okay. Here is the clip.
I think respecting, protecting, strengthening democracy is incredibly important. And I do also agree that we have a real problem with the proliferation of misinformation and disinformation.
Thanks, Congresswoman. I think, is it a yes or no question?
It is not a yes or no question.
Order, please.
So
Can you repeat the question, Congresswoman?
I just love the smirk, and you confirmed
Is that
today.
a question?
Yeah. Do you know what was said off camera? Because you captioned this with leftists are the same all over the world. Do you know what was said that people reacted to?
Yeah, because she
was asking me as you played previously. She was just saying, well, everything is a yes or no question when she was questioning me. So I couldn't give her an answer with more than a sentence. That's why we had this interchange. And then she passed to the witness that she was favoring,
Right.
which was the guy obviously defending censorship. And then he had all the time in the world. She said, well, take your time. It was so funny. The audience.
Yeah.
everybody's a yes or no question for the guy is.
I thought I heard someone say something off camera when there was the look. Like, I don't know if there was something specific that was said that we
No,
couldn't
it's
hear.
because I
yes
look
or
at
yes
him
or
and say
no.
yes or no.
Yes or no.
Yes or no.
Okay,
I look
okay.
at him and say yes or no. Like he had to play by the same rules.
Right. No, that's fantastic.
Do you know something interesting is that these left-wing politicians, they are briefed by the left-wing assistants of the politicians in Brazil. So the thing is, they can ask a question. If you return for them with a question, they do not know because they do not know the stories, they do not know the context. So it's a very funny thing because they try to show to the people that they know what they're talking about, but they don't have idea what they are talking about.
Right.
Because if you take, for example, Michael Schellenberg is not a Bolsonarist, a right-wing, or a conservative. He interviewed Lula in the past. He considered himself, I don't know if nowadays he's still considering himself a left-wing journalist, but still, like the censorship is going after him. He's under investigation in Brazil. It doesn't matter if he's a right-wing or left-wing.
Right.
It's because he's saying things that the system, the establishment do not agree.
Right.
And this is the scenario.
It's terrifying, and I know you guys have a hard out, so I'll let you guys go before we go to Mukla. But I wanted to ask you: you've continually referred to, for people who don't know, you said tomorrow. If what happened, if what transpires tomorrow, tell people what is going on tomorrow that is of consequence with all this.
You mean tomorrow after the hearing?
Yes. Yes.
Or in the U.S.? Well, I think the next steps for the hearing, I made clear asks for the U.S. Congress. I think they have immense power. The U.S. has been, so far in the past few years, a force for evil and censorship in Brazil. And I think the U.S. needs to become, again, a force for freedom and democracy. And so the first thing they can do is what you're doing here now, Stephen. You're creating awareness. The problem is that most of the media, the mainstream media, they don't even cover it. Right. They try to pretend it never happened. So having hearings and having the congressman going to Brazil and having what the Judiciary Committee has done, releasing Brazilian courts, public documents so the public can know what's going on in Brazil is one key. The second key is the U.S. Congress controls the funds, and it funds Brazil tremendously with taxpayers' money. It also funds organizations like the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights that should be working on this to avoid these human rights violations. So the American taxpayer is funding the censorship of Brazil, and this shouldn't happen. The third is they need to exercise the oversight power on the Biden administration. Why is the Biden administration supporting Moraes and Lula, a regime that's pro-Hamas, pro-Venezuela, pro-Cuba, definitely pro-China, pro-Iran? Why does the Biden administration, it's almost like they hate America and they want someone that hate America ruling the most important country in South America.
Right.
But the next step would be Congress can produce a legislation like they have many in place that really creates sanctions against Eduardo, of course, doesn't like this, but I'm a journalist, I'm not a congressman, I can say, that creates sanctions against the Brazilian government and Brazilian public officials who violate human rights. It's not a political thing. If you're violating journalists' rights, if you're violating parliamentarians' rights, congressmen' rights, parliamentary immunity, if you're throwing people in jail without due process, you need to suffer consequences. And that alone will create enormous pressures, and I think our institutions will be able to act and restore our freedoms. Brazil is a peaceful country, although we're very good in jiu-jitsu, as you know.
Yes, I know. Well, though, I know that it pains you to no end that the greatest no-gi grappler of all time is a very cocky American. And it's not even close. It's not even close, and you know it.
I'll dispute that.
In the gi...
You've been finding excuses to not go on the mat with me. Oh, my back hurts. And I've heard all that before.
I void my titanium rib cage. I will say this.
Yeah, okay. I have 3 herniated discs, so let's roll.
I will say this. Hodger Gracie in the gi, he's a Michael Jordan. No-gi Gordon Ryan. Come on, we gotta do that. I mean, Americans take what Brazil created and they made it better.
Let's
it's okay.
agree to disagree.
No, I'm correct. But Gerald had one final question here because I know you guys are on a timeline. I appreciate you taking it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I noticed that you guys are in the Rumble studio up there in D.C. We talked about that a second ago. I know Chris was also in front of Congress testifying on censorship. I know X has been removed and Rumble is now removed out of Brazil. YouTube's still available, though, right?
X not removed yet.
Or not removed yet, but in the process of potentially. Yeah.
Well, what happened was that Elon Musk promised he was going to lift the sanctions, the restrictions in Brazil, but so far he hasn't made good of his promise. He didn't lift any sanctions. Brazil, I'm still heavily sanctioned in Brazil. He actually increased the sanctions by the order of the court after what he said. So we're still waiting on Elon Musk to actually do something. The moment he does, he will be disconnected from Brazil.
Yeah. And then I'll give you back in a question, if I can, is that imagine if Trump is the president and if he looks like this for, okay, Brazilian authorities are banning some U.S. companies there. Let's go to do the same here in U.S. and you start a trade war between U.S. and Brazil. I think this is something that the Brazilian authorities, they are concerned. They fear that Trump can get elected and change all the behavior, change all the, how can I say that, the inertia of the Biden administration, and they start to act in favor of the American companies outside of America. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, and I think, Gerald, the final part of the question was YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, right? They're fine.
They're all compliant.
They're all compliant.
Of course they are. Of course.
Well, if you and I said that on my testimony. If you look what's going on in Brazil and in the U.S., please read the Judiciary Committee on the House report on the censorship industrial complex. The email exchange between the Biden administration officials and the guys from YouTube, Meta, and all those social media companies, they were aligned.
Yes,
they were aiming to please. In Brazil, the theoretical framework is the same. The difference is that Moraes didn't have to informally come to an agreement with social media company. He just ordered them, do whatever I'm saying, otherwise I'll heavily fine you or disconnect you from the country. But the ideas and the requests are actually the same because, like I said, it came from the U.S. It came from the Atlantic Council. It came from the FBI deep state. It came from Department of Justice agents. It came from the American left. Right.
Yeah. The people of Brazil deserve a lot better, and not only from their own government, but you know what? You're right. They deserve a lot better from the shining city on a hill that is the United States of America, and we have not done right by you. So I can only apologize on behalf of myself for not being able to do more about it. But if people want to do more about it, where can they support you, follow you guys? Because that's an active step.
Well, I'm on X. My X publications are usually in English since they can be seen from Brazil. Right. You can look me up at Rio P Figueiredo. It's Figueiredo, and Eduardo Bolsonaro is also
Bolsonaro. Usually Bolsonaro SP. Bolsonaro SP is almost all of my social media.
Okay. Well, very good. I appreciate you guys taking the time. Please do keep us updated. And thank you, guys. I know you have stuff to get to there in Washington, D.C. Be well.
Thanks for having us.
Bolsonaro Figueiredo, everybody.